Hello and welcome back to Kim Reads as we continue with Straight On Till Morning. Wendy and the Fairies. Finally. What Wendy felt was a spray of something that could only be described as golden. Light, effervescent, slightly dry. Fizzy, like the horrible mineral waters Mother sometimes made Father take to aid his digestion. But not with the terrible metallic taste. For the brief moment she could taste anything at all. It was sweet, or no, maybe sour like lemons. No, not like that, more like sparks from a fire. All too soon it was gone, down her throat or up her nose, or dissipated into her flesh and brain. A wave crashed through her body, stirring at her sinuses. She was frozen all over, and then sweating and shuddering. From the moment she felt like herself again. Thank you, why did you... Tinker Bell jingled. Can you understand me? Yes, of course. But wait, Wait, what? Just like that, nothing at all. Everything the fairy said made sense. Like it always made sense. When they were all taken together. Her jingles, her wing flutters, her eye movements. The human girl just hadn't been able to understand before. You're dust, Wendy said slowly. Somehow it all allows me to understand you. The way everyone else can. Tinker Bell shrugged and did a slow spiral in the air, apparently now bored with the conversation. She zoomed up to a palm leaf to examine a bug there, something like the unicorn beetles, but with iridescent rainbow mane that fluttered in the breeze. She jingled quietly and nuzzled it. Well, this will make things a lot easier, Wendy said happily. Did the dust allow her just to understand Tinker Bell or all fairies? What about the creatures of Neverland? How long would it last? Did it change other parts of her? Was it poisonous? Batman doused with fairy dust to fly and imbibed fairy dust to hear fairy language. How much more of her was there to infuse with the substance? Would she become, she secretly hoped, a fairy herself? Magical translating dust aside, understood without anyone saying that despite the apparent change in their relationship status, Fairy would still not stand for the usual Wendy barrage of questions. They would be on better terms now, but they weren't bosom companions. Not yet, at least. All right, Wendy said, patting her dress down and dusting herself out as best she could, while ordering in her a careful list of questions she would dole out, slowly over the course of her time with the fairy. Where do we find these first? Tinker Bell shrugged. Oh, Wendy said, perplexed, but when you said the thing about him going to see the first, you looked like you knew of them. You looked, if you don't mind me saying so, worried. I am worried. About what? Are they dangerous? Tinker Bell swayed this way that on a whisper-soft breeze so faint she might have summoned it with her wings. The first inhabitants of Neverland. The first spirits of the place. Ancient, they were here before mermaids and pirates and fairies and the dreams of men. They are Neverland. Whatever Neverland was when we were born. We were all there, a result of them, and you. Wendy frowned, considering this. The history of Neverland had never occurred to her as a discrete idea before. Neverland was Neverland, a place of infinite happiness and adventure, where anything you could imagine was possible. Did theories like geology, the true age of the earth, and Mr. Darwin's evolution hold for imaginary lands? Where do fairies come from? She asked, thinking it was the simplest entry into a complicated subject. The first laugh of a baby, a special baby, so they say. Tinker Bell smiled wryly. We are here. We appear. Sometimes there are more of us. I woke under a leaf, curled up like a drop of dew, complete, Tinker Bell. But we come the usual way. She made a face. But there is a connection between you and the imagination, the minds of human beings. Wendy hazarded. I guess so. When I tell you a story about Neverland to my brothers, am I making it up? Or am I just repeating what my inner mind already knows? A story that has already actually happened in Neverland. Who knows? I don't. Who cares? I don't. We're talking about the nature of your existence, your world's existence. Doesn't that make you wonder at all? I am. You are. Everyone else is all talk. Tinker Bell jingled a little impatiently. What's important is getting Peter's shadow back and figure out how Captain Hook plans to destroy Neverland. No, of course you're right, Wendy said, but a little distractedly. She really did not agree. Details matter to her. Which hand of Hook's Peter actually cut off, for instance? How many masks the Jolly Roger had? The precise workings of an entire world. The rules by which it existed. Well, soon soothing her tumbling mind, knowledge was power. The more she knew about Neverland, the safer she was. And the more successful their quest would be. But just what do they look like? The first I mean. They do not look like men or fairies or mermaids or pirates or animals or insects or fish or plants. They look like nothing and everything at once. Wendy sighed. All right, I see. But if they're so dangerous and unknowable, why do you think Peter went to see them? The fairy looked disgusted at yet another question. But then she thought about it. Maybe they thought they could give him a new one. A new shadow? Can they do that? They are Neverland. Why did I give you the dust to hear if you won't listen? All right, but what would they do it? At first, the fairy looked troubled. They don't talk or listen to reason, or they do things for their own unknowable reasons. Big things, scary things. So are they opaque and random, powerful and whimsical, unknowable and inscrutable, unpredictable, like an Old Testament sort of God? Tinker Bell looked at her for a long time. Sure, I suppose we must go then in Neverland, chase Peter Pan together to the demacy of these terrifying gods of Neverland. How do we go finding them? Their place of being is never constant for very long. We will still need this to ask where they were seen last. Oh, dangerous whimsical gods, or something like the Flying Dutchman. This gets better and better. So where do we find out what they are? I have been asking the small friends, the many-legged companions of the woods. But I think we shall need to seek fairy help. The ooh that Wendy wouldn't quite suppress in her throat had to be caught and killed physically with her hand. She clapped them over her mouth and held tightly while the sound tried to come out. Tinker Bell did something that was like an eye roll. Stopped with me with a tiny smile thrown in for good measure. Unfortunately, this is the place to do it. We're at the edge of the criminal range in the pernicious forest, and things live here that feast upon the fairy kind. We tend to avoid this area, and we certainly don't draw attention to ourselves by gathering in groups. But hopefully there will be one or two of my kind about, traveling though. Besides predators, my brethren avoid human contact. Hide somewhere and peep out. Absolutely, Wendy breathed, only a little disappointed not to be so involved in meeting them. Watching fairies up close was still more fairy contact than she had ever been before. Even if it didn't seem fair somehow, now that she could understand what they said. She found a clump of tiny, large-leaf plants and ranged their long canes among their body was hidden from view. There was a nice hole in one of the leaves through which she could spy. The hole was being worked on out by a small friend, a caterpillar with a purple scales instead of fur. It looked at Wendy in dubious surprise, or so Wendy assumed. It was hard to tell with its faceted but deathless golden eyes. Excuse me, she whispered. I'll just be here for a moment. She was unsure if the fairy gave her the ability to communicate with the otherwise unspeaking Neverland creatures, but it did give her a long, hard look before going back to the business of chewing and ignoring. Tinker Bell, meanwhile, was drifting with purpose up to the highest leafy branches of the jungle. Her light glowed warmly off the leaves below the droplets seeping off their thick veins, the sweet sap running down the trunks of the trees. It made the whole clearing look, well, it looks like it was touched by fairies, Wendy thought with a smile. All her life she had looked for fairies in more mundane places, experiencing a rush of hope and warmth whenever a scene even palely intimidated the one before her now. Candles at Christmas, firelights in the park, flickering lamps in tea houses, the sparkling leaded glass windows of a sweet shop on winter afternoons when dusk came at 4. A febrile glowing crisscross of threads on a rotten log her cousin had once thrown at her out in the country. Foxfire, magical mushrooms. And here it was for real. Tinker Bell was performing what appeared to be a slow and majestic dance. First she moved to specific points in the air around her, perhaps north, south, east, west, twirling a little at each stop. Then she flew back to the corner and made a strange bowing motion, keeping her tiny feet daintily together and putting her arms out gracefully like a swan. As she completed each movement, fairy dust fell from her wings in glittering, languorous trails hanging in the air just enough to form shape. She started the dance over again, faster this time. And again, even faster. Her trail of sparkles almost resolved into a picture. Crisscross lines constantly flowing down like driplets of luminous paint. Wendy felt a bit like John, overwhelmed with a desire to try to reduce and explain and thereby translate the magic. But she also felt a lot like Michael, with an almost overwhelming urge to break free from her hiding place and see it up close, to feel the sparkles on her nose, to run a hand through the sigils, not for the purpose of destruction, but from a hapless, joyful desire to be part of it all. Tinker Bell finally stopped, breathing heavily. Wendy held her own breath, and then, out of the darkness, an answering glow. And that's the end of that chapter.